The morning in New York started like any other. The sunlight filtered through the curtains of my small apartment, creating a pattern of dancing shadows on the wooden floor. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee that had gone cold while examining the pile of bills that had accumulated in front of me. The numbers seemed to mock me, as if they had a life of their own, screaming that I needed a miracle. As an interior designer, my job was to create beauty, but at that moment, all I could see was the financial chaos surrounding me. "Emma, you need to make this work," I murmured to myself, trying to encourage myself. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, reminding myself of all the dreams I had. I wanted to be recognized in my profession. I wanted to design the most stunning spaces in New York. But what I truly wanted more than anything was to find true love. A love that would make me forget the loneliness the city imposed. I looked out the window and saw people rushing in the streets, each with their own stories and disappointments. What I didn't know was that fate was about to surprise me in a way I could never have imagined. That afternoon, while walking to the studio, I couldn't help but think about how everyone else's love lives seemed more exciting than mine. I saw couples laughing, holding hands, and sharing moments that felt so genuine. And me, I was stuck in a cycle of disastrous dates with people who weren't right for me. My last date had been with an artist who seemed more like a high school kid who had forgotten to grow up. He talked incessantly about his art, and seemed more interested in his own image than in getting to know the person beside him. Why is it so hard to find someone who truly connects with me? I thought, frustrated as I crossed the street. The noise of the cars and the smell of street food invaded my senses, but my mind was elsewhere. I just wanted someone to look into my eyes and see beyond the surface, someone who understood what I truly valued in life. The day went on, and I lost myself in my tasks. The studio was in constant agitation, and I let myself be carried away by the adrenaline of work. The colors, the fabrics, the textures. All of it fascinated me. But deep down, a sadness settled in my heart. What I really wanted, beyond professional success, was a partner. Someone to share the ups and downs of life with. That night, while organizing the materials I would use the next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend asking if I was going to a charity event the next day. I hesitated. Social events weren't exactly my strong suit. But at the same time, I thought it could be an opportunity to make new connections, perhaps even meet someone interesting. "It'll be fun, Emma. Besides, you never know who might show up," the message read. I ended up deciding to go. After all, life couldn't just be work and loneliness. When I arrived at the event, I was enveloped by the mix of laughter, music, and an air of sophistication that permeated the atmosphere. People were dressed elegantly, and I felt a bit out of place, as if I had stepped into a world that wasn't mine. But as the night progressed, I began to loosen up and enjoy the ambience. Conversations about art, fashion, and charity filled the air, and I found myself smiling, albeit shyly. It was then that, amidst the crowd, a man caught my attention. He was talking with a group, and his presence was undeniable. Tall, with a charismatic smile and penetrating eyes, he exuded confidence. Something about his demeanor intrigued me. As soon as our eyes met, I felt butterflies in my stomach. He was Ethan Bennett, a billionaire known in the city, but I didn't know that at the time. What I did know was that he seemed different. "Hi, I'm Ethan," he introduced himself, extending his hand. His grip was firm, and I felt instantly drawn to him. "Emma," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "It's a pleasure." We found ourselves engaged in a conversation that flowed naturally. We talked about the city, our jobs, and what brought us to that event. I couldn't take my eyes off his, which sparkled with an intensity that left me intrigued. "You're an interior designer, right? I've always admired that field. It's amazing how you can transform spaces," he commented, his genuine tone making my heart race. "Thank you. It's a challenge, but I love what I do. Each project is a new story," I said, feeling excited that he showed interest. The conversation continued, and at one point, Ethan stepped back a little, as if pondering something. Then, with a serious expression, he said, Emma, I need to be honest with you. I'm in a complicated situation and, well, I'm looking for someone who can help me. Those words hit me like a bucket of cold water. What did he mean by help? Curiosity consumed me. What do you mean? What are you talking about? I asked, trying to hide my confusion. He hesitated, and I could see he was weighing his words. I need to get married. It's a matter of inheritance and family. It's complicated, but I thought a marriage by contract could be the solution. Would you be willing to consider it? I couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. A marriage by contract. That's unusual. The idea seemed absurd, but at the same time, there was something intriguing about the proposal. I know it sounds crazy, but I can offer a generous salary, and you wouldn't have to give up your life. It would just be an agreement, he said. His gaze fixed on mine, as if trying to convince me it was a viable idea. You must be joking, I replied, still a bit stunned. I can't just marry a stranger for money. I understand, Emma, but think about it. You could have the freedom to continue your career and still secure your financial future, he argued, his voice calm and persuasive. I hesitated, my thoughts racing through my mind. The proposal was tempting, but the idea of a loveless marriage felt daunting. Yet, the bills on my table, the dreams I wanted to fulfill, everything weighed heavily on my decision. I need to think, I finally said, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Ethan nodded, as if he had been expecting this response. Of course, you don't need to decide now. But if you're interested, we can talk more about it. As the conversation continued, I found myself torn between the desire to follow my heart and the reason that lay before me. What was more important, love or security? The night went on, but my mind was far away, immersed in thoughts of a future I had never imagined. As soon as I signed the contract, a mix of relief and nervousness washed over me. This was a decision that would change my life, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to embark on an emotional roller coaster. Ethan Bennett wasn't just a billionaire. He was an enigma. The man who was about to become my husband by contract was a force of nature, and I had no idea what to expect. Ethan's luxurious home was worlds away from my small apartment in New York. As soon as I stepped inside, I was greeted by an immense space, decorated with a blend of modernity and touches of classical art. The walls were adorned with stunning paintings, some of which I recognized from exhibitions I'd seen in galleries. What I didn't know was that those paintings were Ethan's. In one corner, a large window allowed sunlight to pour in, illuminating the space with a soft glow. It was a place that exuded sophistication yet had a peculiar charm. "Welcome to my home," Ethan said, with a smile that I could swear held a hint of vulnerability. "Make yourself at home. This is your new place too, at least until the contract is up," I finished, trying to keep the tone light, even though the idea of the contract hung over us like a dark cloud. He nodded but couldn't hide the pensive expression that formed on his face. The silence that followed was heavy, and I felt compelled to break it. "So, where do you keep your things?" I asked, trying to divert any palpable tension. "Upstairs. I'll help you bring your stuff in," he replied, moving quickly toward the staircase. The day passed in a whirlwind of unpacking and casual conversation. Ethan was surprisingly attentive, offering to help with boxes and showing me around the house. As time went by, I realized there was a gentle, almost affectionate side to him, and it intrigued me. Amidst the formality of our agreement, there were moments when he seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. "Were you always an interior designer?" he asked as we organized some of my belongings in the living room. "Yes, since college. I love transforming spaces. To me, every environment has a story that deserves to be told," I replied, feeling more at ease with him as the minutes passed. "That's fascinating. What do you think this house is trying to say?" he joked, watching me closely. Paused, considering the question. "Well, it speaks of success, but also of loneliness. There's something solemn here, as if the walls hold secrets." Ethan smiled, a grin that lit up his face and made my heart race. That's an interesting perspective. Maybe I've focused so much on business that I've neglected the emotional side of life, he said thoughtfully. I was surprised by his revelation. The image of the cold, distant billionaire began to fade, revealing a man grappling with his own internal battles. Our conversation flowed naturally, and I found myself increasingly interested in getting to know the real Ethan. That evening, we decided to make a simple dinner. I prepared a salad while he roasted a chicken in the oven. The kitchen, which had once seemed like an impersonal space, quickly came to life with the aroma of food and our laughter. During dinner, we talked about our lives. Ethan shared some childhood memories and how family pressure shaped him into the man he was. The intimacy forming between us was palpable, and I was beginning to see Ethan in a new light. I never thought a marriage contract could lead to this, he said, breaking the silence that followed the meal. You make me feel like I'm living something real, rather than just going through the motions. I didn't expect this either, I confessed, looking into his eyes. But it's strange how we're building a friendship amidst all this. Our gaze locked in a moment that felt like it lasted forever. Something stirred within me, but the reminder of our agreement made me hesitate. Ethan seemed to sense the tension as he quickly looked away. It's best not to confuse things, Emma. Remember that this is temporary, he said, his voice lower, almost a whisper. I knew he was right, but the connection forming between us was undeniable. The attraction was growing, and I wondered what it meant for our contract. Dinner concluded, and as we cleared the table, the atmosphere became a bit heavier. What do you like to do when you're not working? Asked, trying to lighten the mood. I paint, he replied, a spark in his eyes. It's a way for me to express myself. My paintings are an extension of who I am. I encouraged him to show me some of his works, and in doing so, I discovered a side of Ethan that was sensitive and creative. He led me to his studio, where the soft light of late afternoon illuminated the canvases hanging on the walls. The vibrant colors and expressive brushstrokes revealed a passionate artist. Wow, Ethan, you're really talented, I said, admiring a painting that depicted a sunset. Thanks. It's one of my favorites, he replied, a bit shy. Time passed, and our friendship began to deepen. What had started as a business arrangement was evolving into something more complex and beautiful. Yet, a shadow still loomed over us, reminding us that all of this had an expiration date. One evening, as we shared a candlelit dinner, the tension between us heightened once again. I could feel my heart racing as I looked at him, and Ethan seemed to be grappling with the same dilemma. Emma, He began but paused, as if struggling with what he wanted to say. What is it? I asked, encouraging him to continue. I just don't want this to get complicated. We're here for a reason, and I don't want you to think this is more than just a contract. He spoke, but his voice conveyed insecurity. I understand, Ethan, I replied, trying to remain calm. But it's hard to ignore what we're feeling. We can't just brush this aside. A pause followed, and the tension between us was nearly tangible. I wanted more, but fear and uncertainty held us back. I know. And that scares me, he admitted, looking at the floor as if trying to avoid my gaze. So what do we do now? I asked, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. We need to think, he finally looked at me, and I could see the struggle in his eyes. We need to decide what this means for us. ####, I nodded. But the truth was that the longer we spent together, the harder it became to ignore the attraction that was developing between us. The contract, which had started as a practical solution, now felt like an obstacle to what we were really feeling. And as the night wore on, the uncertainty about the future loomed like a cloud, waiting for the right moment to burst into a storm. The atmosphere in the art gallery was electrically vibrant. The lights were softly diffused, highlighting Ethan's paintings that adorned the walls. I felt nervous but also excited. It was the first time I had organized an exhibition of this scale, and more importantly, it was an occasion to showcase his talent to the world. As I looked around, I noticed that most of the guests were curious, admiring the works that reflected not only Ethan's skill but also a side of him that few knew. "Emma, you did an amazing job." He approached me, a genuine smile on his lips. "People are really interested in my work." "Thank you, Ethan. But the credit goes to you. Your paintings speak for themselves." I smiled back, my heart racing with his proximity. The connection between us was growing more intense, and I didn't know whether that was good or bad. "You have a way of touching people with your art. That's rare," I said, admiring the passion that radiated from him as he spoke about the paintings. "Which one is your favorite?" He looked at a particular painting, an abstract representation of a city at sunset, with vibrant colors and fluid shapes. "This one," he replied, "is about my dreams. I always wanted to capture the essence of New York, with its lights and shadows." "It's beautiful," I murmured, feeling warmth rise to my cheeks. "You really manage to convey emotions through your works. That's something I admire." Ethan turned to me, his deep blue eyes seeming to read every thought that passed through my mind. "And you, Emma? What do you dream of achieving?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about all my aspirations, how I had fought to get where I was. "I want to make a difference in the world of interior design. I want people to feel good in their homes, for every space to reflect who they really are." "You're already doing that, aren't you?" He paused, looking at me with an intensity that made me feel exposed. "Your work is incredible." I felt my heart race not just from his words, but from the way he spoke. There was something more there, a connection that was slowly forming but firmly. "Thank you, Ethan. Your support means a lot to me." The night continued, and the event was a success. People were excited, and I watched Ethan interact with the guests, sharing stories about his works. He was in his element, and I felt proud to be by his side, even if it was just as a contracted wife. After the event, as we were back at his house, a comfortable silence settled in. He seemed lost in his thoughts. "Do you think people really enjoyed it?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Yes, definitely. Your art has a real impact on people. They were talking about it throughout the night." I sat on the couch watching him. He looked so thoughtful, so vulnerable. "I've always been afraid of criticism. Art is an extension of me, and the idea that someone might not like it, well, that scares me," he confessed, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "But you've already overcome that, Ethan. You had the courage to expose your feelings through your art. That's more than most people can do." I leaned in, trying to convey my sincerity. "You should be proud." He looked at me, and for a moment the world around us faded away. "You're a positive influence in my life, Emma. I don't know what I'd do without you here." My cheeks flushed with his compliment. "You're also an influence for me. The way you throw yourself into painting and what you love. It's inspiring." The tension between us was palpable, and I could feel my body reacting to every little movement he made. It was as if there was an invisible line separating us, but at the same time, that line was about to be broken. Before I could process my thoughts, Ethan leaned in closer, and for a moment I thought he was going to kiss me. But then something changed in his gaze. He pulled back slightly, as if he were wrestling with his own feelings. "I need some time to think about all of this," he said, his voice hesitant. That hit me like a bucket of cold water. "Of course I understand." My response came out drier than I intended. What I really wanted to say was that I didn't want him to pull away. But at the same time, I knew he had his own internal battles. In the days that followed, the tension between us escalated. I threw myself into my work, trying to focus on my projects and distract myself from the growing sense that something was changing between us. Ethan seemed more distant, and even when we were in the same room, there was a heavy silence between us. "Emma, do you have a moment?" Ethan appeared at my office door, his face serious. "Of course, Ethan. What's up?" I set aside the papers I was organizing, feeling my heart race again. "I want to talk about the exhibition and about us." He sat down in the chair across from my desk, his hands clasped together. "What are you thinking?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He hesitated before speaking, as if weighing each word. "I don't want this friendship to turn into something that could hurt us. What we have is special, but it's also complex, and I don't want it to change what we have." "Are you saying we should pull away?" I asked, anxiety swelling in my chest. "Not exactly," he replied quickly. "It's just that I'm feeling confused. I don't know if I should let myself go with these feelings. The contract, all of this, it's complicated." "I understand," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But we can't ignore what's happening between us. That wouldn't be fair." He looked me in the eyes, and for a moment, I saw a spark of vulnerability that made me want to reach out to him even more. "If I open up to you and it doesn't work out, I don't know how to handle that. You're important to me, Emma. And you are to me, Ethan. But I can't keep living like this in limbo." My voice trembled, but I needed to be honest. "If you can't see me as something more, we need to be clear about that." He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine. "I don't want to lose you, but I also can't promise anything. Not while all of this is tangled. So what do we do now?" I asked, feeling a knot in my throat. "We can continue as we are, but I need time. Time to understand what I really want," he said, his voice soft yet firm. Insecurity began to consume me. What if he decided I wasn't the right choice? Uncertainty loomed over us like a dark cloud, and I didn't know how to dissipate it. Yet, for a moment, as I looked into his eyes, I felt that there was still hope. Hope that, somewhere beyond the barriers we had built, there was room for something more. And then, as silence settled between us once again, I realized that love, even when complicated, was a journey I was willing to embark on, as long as he was willing to accompany me. The soft light of dusk filtered through the windows of Ethan's apartment, casting dancing shadows on the white walls. I was sitting on the sofa, observing the paintings that adorned the space. Each one told a story, a piece of Ethan's heart captured in paint. However, what I truly wanted was to understand his story, and mine, from that moment on. The sound of the door opening brought my attention back to reality. Ethan walked in, looking more tired than usual, his gaze lost in thought. "Hey, Emma," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How was your day?" "I worked on some ideas for the new project," I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "And you? How was the meeting with your dad?" "As always, tense," he sighed, throwing his jacket in a corner and collapsing next to me on the sofa. "He's more insistent than ever about the marriage." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The word marriage echoed in my mind, reminding me of the contract that sealed our union. Despite the coldness of the agreement, my connection with Ethan was becoming increasingly complex. "And what are you thinking about it?" I asked hesitantly. His answer could change everything between us. "To be honest," he began, looking at the floor, "I don't know what to think." Claire showed up out of nowhere and started talking about how everything could be different if we got back together. I felt my heart race. Claire. Her name was like a dagger, piercing my confidence. "And what did you say to her?" I inquired, trying to remain calm. "I told her I wasn't interested," Ethan replied, but his voice wavered. "But the truth is, sometimes I wonder if this is all just a big mess. I don't want to hurt you, Emma, but the pressure is unbearable." I knew I needed to be honest. "Ethan, I don't want to be an option. I'm not Claire. If you have feelings for her, if you're thinking about her, it's better that we're honest with each other." He turned to me, his eyes a sea of emotions. "I don't want to lose you, but I feel like I'm being pulled in opposite directions. One side is the security that Claire represents, and the other is you. You make me feel things I didn't know I could feel, but all of this is so new and scary. Then why don't we try to just be us? Without the past, without the pressure of the future," I suggested, my heart pounding. "We can focus on us, on who we are now." Ethan hesitated, and every second felt like an eternity. "You're right. We need to concentrate on each other. The relief I felt hearing those words was almost palpable. "So, how about we start with a romantic dinner? Something simple, just the two of us, no distractions." "That sounds perfect," he smiled, and for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. We agreed to prepare dinner, and our moments together began to flow again. The kitchen was filled with laughter and conversation as we chopped vegetables and cooked pasta. I allowed myself to be light-hearted and have fun, even as Claire's shadow still loomed over us. After a few hours, dinner was ready. The lit candles cast a soft glow over the table, and the aroma of the food filled the air. We sat across from each other, and I couldn't help but think how surreal all of this was. Contract of love. The idea sounded so absurd, yet here we were, transforming that agreement into something resembling a real relationship. "You know, Emma," Ethan began, breaking the silence that had settled between us, "I didn't expect to feel this way. To be honest, I thought this contract would just be a formality, but now—" He hesitated, looking into my eyes. "Now, I feel like you've become a part of me." My heart raced. "Ethan, I feel that way too. You are different from what I imagined. I never thought I could care so much for someone like this." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "That's good to hear. I don't want our story to be just a contract. I want it to be real." The conversation flowed naturally, and for a moment, we forgot about the external pressures. However, the tension was still there, lurking like a shadow. As soon as we finished dinner, he got up to fetch a bottle of wine. The sound of his footsteps echoed while I gazed out the window, admiring the lights of New York. When he returned, he placed the bottle on the table and filled our glasses. "To a better future," he toasted, and I raised my glass, feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. "To new possibilities," I replied, looking into his eyes. As our glasses clinked, a comfortable silence enveloped the room. The tension that had once plagued us now felt distant. While we chatted about trivial matters, I realized that the space between us was closing, and the emotional connection we had built was solidifying. After some time, Ethan leaned in closer to me. "Can I be honest?" he asked, his voice low and soft. "Of course," I replied, my heart racing. "I don't want this night to end. Since you entered my life, everything has changed. You make me want to be a better person." Those words warmed my heart. I never imagined he felt that way. "Ethan, that means a lot to me. I want you to know that I'm here, not just as a wife by contract, but as someone who truly cares." He hesitated for a moment, and then with a smooth motion took my hand. "Emma, I'm falling in love with you." The world around us disappeared. His declaration was like a ray of light in the darkness. "Ethan, I'm falling in love with you too," I said, sincerity overflowing in my voice. "But we need to be careful. We have to face the challenges together and not let the past interfere with our present." "I agree," he murmured, and then, without thinking twice, he leaned in and sealed that moment with a kiss. A gentle kiss, but full of emotion. A kiss that promised an uncertain future, yet brimming with possibilities. When we pulled away, both breathless, the silence that followed was thick, yet full of meaning. I knew there were still many things to face, especially with Claire still present in Ethan's life. But in that instant, everything felt perfect. The love that was beginning to blossom between us was stronger than any contract. We were ready to fight for it together, even though the shadow of the past still lingered in our minds. I sat at the table in my kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. The morning sun filtered through the linen curtains, creating a play of light and shadow that mirrored my emotional state. It was an ordinary day, but the tension in the air made everything feel exceptionally heavy. Ethan and I had decided it would be best to distance ourselves from each other, but the thought of separation left me restless, as if I were trying to escape a storm that had already begun to brew. With the coffee mug in hand, I let my thoughts wander. What was this feeling that consumed me? With each passing day, the friendship we had built grew more complex. A marriage that had started as a contract now seemed to be more than that. Yet, at the same time, there was an invisible barrier that separated us. Ethan's past and Claire's persistent presence. The day dragged on, and I immersed myself in work. My current project, a renovation of an apartment on the Upper East Side, demanded my full attention. As I adjusted the details of the layout, Ethan's image popped into my mind. I could see his smile, hear his laughter, and it only left me more confused. After all, how had I managed to fall for someone in such an unusual and complicated context? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice when my phone vibrated on the table. Ethan's name lit up the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. But when I answered, it was his assistant, David, who spoke on the other end. "Emma, you need to come to the office. Ethan needs you. It's urgent." David's words put me on high alert. What could be so urgent? The urgency in his voice sent a chill down my spine. With slightly trembling hands, I grabbed an appropriate outfit and rushed out. The journey to the office felt longer than usual, and my anxiety grew with every corner I turned. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Ethan was sitting at his desk, his expression closed off. He looked exhausted, as if he had faced a battle. I approached slowly, but he didn't look up. "What happened?" I asked, trying to decipher his state. "Claire," he began, but then stopped as if the words were stuck in his throat. Finally, he took a deep breath and continued. "She said she's pregnant." My heart sank at the news. Those words sounded like a sentence. The reality of what we were living hit me with brutal clarity. I felt as if the ground beneath my feet was crumbling, and all that remained was a deep void. "What are you going to do?" I managed to ask, though I knew the answer could be devastating. "I don't know, Emma. I don't know." He finally lifted his eyes to mine, and I saw the pain reflected in them. "I don't want this. I don't want to go back to her, but what if it's true?" The doubt in his voice cut through me like a knife. I wanted to scream, to tell him that he didn't have to feel trapped, that he could be free, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was look at him, trying to understand how something so simple could become a tangled web of feelings and obligations. "You still have a contract with me, Ethan." The words slipped out like a whisper, an attempt to remind him that our relationship, no matter how complex, was a conscious choice made by both of us. He shook his head, frustrated. "I know, but it's not just a contract, and you know that." I can't ignore what Claire said. The tension between us intensified, each word becoming a weight that seemed to suffocate us. I wanted to be the person who supported him, but the thought of Claire, of a life he could have with her, left me shattered. What could I offer Ethan that she couldn't? "We need to talk about this." I tried to keep my voice steady, but vulnerability crept in, and I realized my determination was starting to crumble. "We need to decide what we want." "I don't know." He stood up abruptly, frustration etched on his face. "I'm stuck between two worlds, Emma." Those words cut deep. He was right, and the conflict forming in his heart reflected my own. Felt trapped too. The only difference was that I had prepared for this, while he was fighting against a past that seemed intent on returning. "What do you really want, Ethan?" I asked, trying to capture his attention. "I can't compete with what you feel for her, but it's not about that." He interrupted, his voice raised. "I don't want to be forced to choose anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt small, insignificant in the face of the storm brewing between us. What he wanted wasn't a contract, but freedom. And I wasn't sure if I could be that freedom. "I need some time. We need some time," he finally said, his voice calmer but still heavy with tension. And so, with a knot in my stomach, I left the office, reality hitting my chest like an unbearable weight. The idea of temporarily distancing ourselves felt like the only viable solution, but what would that mean for us? I was certain my heart couldn't bear that distance. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work. Every project I took on seemed like a way to escape reality. But even so, thoughts of Ethan and Claire never left me. His face appeared in every corner of the city, in every cafe I entered, and even in work meetings. It was as if, no matter how hard I tried, he was always present. One night, while organizing some fabric samples, My phone vibrated again. It was a message from David. "Emma, you need to know. Claire isn't pregnant. It's all a manipulation." Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or furious. The truth was that this was all a trap to keep Ethan bound to a past he seemed desperate to leave behind. Anger surged within me, and I realized I could no longer remain on the sidelines. ####, I needed to confront Ethan. I had to know the truth and what he really wanted. With renewed determination, I grabbed the car keys and headed to his house. With every kilometer I drove, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. What would I say? How would he react? But one thing was certain. I couldn't just sit back and wait for things to resolve themselves. I needed to fight for what was starting to form between us, even if it meant facing the truth head-on. When I arrived, the living room light was on. I took a deep breath, turned the doorknob and walked in. The sight of Ethan standing there, hands in his pockets, with a thoughtful expression made my heart race. "We need to talk," I said, and he turned around, surprise evident on his face. "Emma," he began, but I didn't let him continue. "I found out about Claire." The words came out with an intensity that surprised me. "And I can't bear this uncertainty anymore." He looked at me, a mix of confusion and relief in his eyes. What I didn't know was that this conversation would change everything between us, and perhaps, just perhaps, lead me to a future I never imagined I would desire. The morning light flooded my apartment with an intensity that seemed to mirror the confusion and pain I felt inside. I knew I needed to have a serious conversation with Ethan, and that made me incredibly uncomfortable. I sat at the kitchen table, steaming mugs of coffee in front of me, while my mind drifted between memories of the happy moments we shared and the grim reality of Claire's manipulation. The doorbell rang and my heart raced. I knew it was Ethan. I got up, took a deep breath and went to the door. When I opened it, I saw his face, still showing traces of sleep but wearing an expression of concern that made my chest tighten. "Hi, Emma," he said, trying to smile. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I replied, stepping aside. He walked in, and the air between us felt charged. I closed the door and turned to him. "We need to talk." The tension grew like a storm cloud, and he nodded. His eyes locked on mine. "About Claire." "About us, Ethan." The firmness in my voice surprised me a little, but determination took over. He sat at the table and I followed suit, keeping my eyes on his face. "Emma, I can't keep doing this." My words came out faster than I had planned. "I can't be just an option, a contract. I feel like I'm competing with the past, and I don't want that. Ethan, I fell in love with you, and knowing that Claire is still in your life like this hurts me. You can't expect me to just ignore it. Do you really believe you could give me the kind of love I deserve?" He paused, as if searching for the right words. "Emma, I don't want you to feel this way. You're important to me more than I can express. But Claire, she's still in the middle of all this." "I know, and that's exactly why I need to go. I can't be trapped in a situation that makes me feel insecure. I'm not the kind of woman who will stand behind you while you try to decide between me and what once was." He looked like he was crumbling in front of me, and I felt a pang in my heart. "Please don't do this. Don't leave me like this." Tears began to slide down my face, and I quickly wiped them away, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I need this. I need some time away from you, away from these uncertainties." He stood up, the expression of pain etched on his face. "Emma, I can't let you go like this. I don't know how to handle it." "Then maybe you should think about what you really want. Because I can't be part of your past anymore." The words echoed between us, and seeing his face contorted in pain made me want to take it all back, but reason prevailed. I needed to do this. I needed to free myself. He turned and walked to the door, hesitating for a moment before leaving. "I will fight for you, Emma. Don't think this is over." His words lingered in my mind as I closed the door. What was that? I knew the situation was complicated, but there was something in his determination that sparked a glimmer of hope. However, I couldn't allow myself to get carried away by it. I needed space. The following days were a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, immersing myself in design projects that occupied my mind. But every time I glanced at my phone, a part of me hoped for a message from him. But nothing came. Ethan's absence felt like an echo, and I wondered if he was truly fighting for me or if he had decided to leave everything as it was. Then I received a call. It was Ethan. My heart raced, but his voice wasn't desperate. He sounded calm, even determined. "Emma, we need to talk." "It's urgent." "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, but anxiety was rising. "About Claire. I found out something you need to know." I felt a chill in my stomach. "What did you find out?" "Emma, she's not pregnant. She never was." It was all a manipulation to hold me back. An unexpected relief washed over me, but anger surged as well. "How did you find that out?" She tried to convince me to come back, and during the conversation, I confronted her. She admitted she lied. "Emma, I can't let this control me anymore. I want you." His words reverberated, and I found myself caught between anger and joy. "And what about everything that happened? You made me believe you were trapped by her." "I was. But now that I know the truth, I can't let you go again. You are the woman I love, Emma. I don't want to live in a contract anymore. I want a real relationship." The echo of his confession hit me like lightning, and I realized my heart was still open to him. "Are you really serious?" "Yes. I know I messed everything up, but I want to make this right. I'm willing to fight for us. Please give me a chance." I need to think, Ethan." "There's no need to think. If you still love me, come with me. Let's talk in person." I hesitated, but the desire to see him again was strong. "Okay. Where do you want me to go?" "I'll pick you up. We need to sort this out." It wasn't long before he arrived, and seeing him made my heart race. He seemed different, more determined, and something inside me ignited. We got into the car, and the silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. "Where are we going?" "Yes. To a special place. A place where we can start over." With every kilometer, my heart raced, and when we arrived at a small park by the river, I was met with a scene that looked straight out of a fairy tale. The sun was setting behind the skyscrapers, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. ####. "This place is beautiful," I commented, admiring the view. "It is. This is where I used to come to think. And where I decided that I can no longer live in the shadow of my past. I want to build a future with you." He turned to me, his eyes shining with an intensity that made me feel as if the world around us had disappeared. "Emma, you make me want to be a better person. And I don't just want a contract anymore. I want you to be my wife for real." My hands trembled as he held out a small box. When I opened it, I revealed a delicate engagement ring, sparkling in the light of the setting sun. "Emma, will you marry me not as a contract, but as a commitment of true love?" Tears streamed down my face as I looked at him, the sincerity of his words resonating in my heart. "Yes, Ethan. I accept." As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the weight of the past finally dissipate. What began as a contract for love had transformed into something genuine, and together, we were ready to rewrite our story.